Alright, Final Fantasy has had a lot of combat mechanics. Some of them they've used more than once, some of them they've used for an entire generation. And then the other ones they made the best thing ever that a bunch of other games copied and then just never used it ever again. I will never understand why. So, I'm just going to go over every single one, and in games that it's been repeated, like the ATB system in 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 2, I'm going to go over the more unique combat mechanics from that game. So like in Final Fantasy V, the job system, Final Fantasy III, the job system, Final Fantasy XII, the job system. But yeah, let's get started with Final Fantasy I. It's just going to be in order too, so yeah. It's pretty basic. Final Fantasy I's combat is pretty basic. There's not a huge amount of completely new things that they do, but it was revolutionary for the time. It's a pretty steady thing. It's pretty strict turn-based order thing, like your average, like, Dragon Quest, whatever you want to compare there. There's no real way to manipulate the turn order in battle other than leveling and just using faster classes, because they had the class system. There isn't too much to say about it, though. It relies on what jobs you choose, and although you can beat it with really any combo of class, pretty much, it has some hidden stuff that can either screw you over or make you succeed completely. Shout out to Game Champ. They did a playthrough of all white mages. They're awesome. Go give them some love. So Final Fantasy I's magic system continues for about 2 more games, and it's the system where you get a limited amount of spells that you can use per level. So whenever you level up, you most likely will get either access to higher level magic or more uses for your basic spells. So if you're using like level 1 spells, it could go from like 1 use to 2 uses to 3 uses, etc, etc. You also have to swap out your spells because you can only hold 3 at a time for each level. I'm not too great on it. I'm not too big on it, but it has its own charm. I'm not gonna sit here and preach my own opinion, you know? Alright, on the second entry and already onto a very weird entry, Final Fantasy II. It's very, very, very hit or miss for people. It influenced the Saga series, though. Basically, no matter what you use, you have to individually level it up. So say you want to use a sword on Firen. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. If you want to use a sword on Firen and give him also an axe, you can do that. It's just it's going to take you forever to level up both the axe and the sword stat. Because everything's its own stat. Even HP. The most optimal way to get HP is to kill yourself. It doesn't sound too bad, but in gameplay and practice, it really doesn't feel great. And the HP thing isn't even guaranteed. It's just a chance. So unless you're playing the Pixel Remaster where you can guarantee your HP stat going up after a certain amount of battles, you just have to rely on RNG. Aside from 2 just not being that great of a Final Fantasy game, it was cool, but I'd probably put it towards the bottom of my favorite combat mechanics. Alright, now Final Fantasy III is a bit more of a weird one, right? A lot of people say it's one of the easier ones in the pixel format. It's fine. It's the first one to feature the job system, though, as basic as it is in this game, and as essential it is to use some jobs to get through some parts of the game, which is annoying and not the right way to do it. I respect them for doing something new here, and I do like the job system, right? I'm a sucker for jobs in RPGs. I have an entire other video written about jobs in a different game, but it's just very basic compared to other games that do this, like 5, where in 5 you get to keep some of the abilities that you actually earn through like progressing through the game and leveling up your jobs and everything. This game you can't really do that. There's no real way to just keep the job. The only way you can use that job is if you use it. And if, say, you have 4 people on Black Mage, and an upcoming dungeon needs you to go to White Mage, you're kind of screwed. I don't mind the 3. I appreciate it for what it did. It's just, I think it could have done a lot better. There are things like level bonuses where you still do get stats from leveling up, but it only really does the same thing as Final Fantasy VI, which we'll cover later, where when you level up, it just gives you a stat boost, or just increases the steal rate, and that's kind of compared to other implementations of the job system, in my opinion at least. Alright, now we're getting into the thing that a lot of Final Fantasy games are used to, which is the ATB system, active time battle system. It's not fantastic in this. There's no visual indicator for when your turn is, so it still feels very turn-based. Basically, the ATB system, you can actually influence your turns and everything. If you use something like haste, or a boss uses slow on you, then that actually affects how soon your next attack will be. So if you use haste on, say, Cecil or King, their turn will come faster. And it's a great mechanic. It really set Final Fantasy apart back in the day. It's basically used from 4 all the way till 9, and then is like here and there incorporated in different games, so prepare for me to kind of go off the rails a little bit with some of these explanations here. Okay, Final Fantasy V has 2 mechanics that I can go over. One's a lot more basic than the other one, so I'm just going to get it out of the way real quick. Final Fantasy V gives you an actual visual indicator to see when your turn's going to come up, which is great. That's an insane change to the ATB system. And the job system got massively expanded, right? You get to keep abilities from each job that you learn from. The last video is a bit more in-depth about the job system. I'm going to kind of skim over it because I have 17 games to cover here. But let's give an example, right? So say Bart's learned Knight and Monk. You could then swap to Freelancer and get that job's stat bonus. So say you go to Monk, Knight, and everything. You would take the higher stat. It wouldn't combine, because that would make Freelancer even more broken than it already is, giving you 2 ability slots and the stat bonus of your jobs. It would give the Monk's strength bonus of 26 over the Knight's stat buff of 23. So Freelancer is just the strongest job in the game, as long as you have the ability to swap around with other jobs, which is why people say, whenever people mention Final Fantasy V, because it's a bit underrated, they all say, hey, just screw around with a bunch of different jobs, pick as many as you want, and just go crazy, because that system will help you out so much. Onto one of the best Final Fantasy games ever, Final Fantasy VI. The system is a little weird, right? It's not weird, but it's just a little less there than like Final Fantasy V or other games. So it uses the Esper system. Basically, once you get far enough in the game, you can equip Magicite, which is just summons, right? Depending on which one you have equipped, you can summon Ifrit, Shiva, Odin, whoever. But you can also learn different magic from them, like a lot of black and white spells. So, for an example, you could take Ifrit, you can learn Fire and Fira from Ifrit, then you can swap to another Esper that would give you other spells like Blizzard, Thunder, Bio, whatever, and possibly learn them faster from another Esper. It's a pretty good system. It's a bit less in your face than the job system or anything else, and it still uses the ATB gauge. Don't worry, it's gonna be here till like 9. So like I'm just not gonna mention it from here on out. But it just really complements 8, the whole theme of summoners and everything, and Terra. Some party members can actually learn magic separately, like Terra and Celes. And there's also a couple that can't even use them, like Gogo and Umaro, but that's because you just can't control them, so. Alright, here's the one that a lot of people probably clicked on this video for, and the next one, but we'll get to that. We'll do this one first. Final Fantasy VII has the materia system. The materia system's kind of awesome, right? Because it takes a lot of systems that get expanded upon in later entries, like Final Fantasy IX, and has elements that could seem like the sphere grid from Final Fantasy X. It's a bit more murky. Basically, if you have the materia of a spell or ability, that unit can use that spell or ability. So say it has steel, and you put steel on Cloud, he can now use steel. There's no need for whatever thief you would need to use in Final Fantasy VII. You can also level them up through use. You can link them together for different effects, like if you give Magnify and Fire, it creates Fira, so you don't have to go through the struggle of having to grind out Fire to just get Fira. There's slots on armor, there's slots on weapons, there's slots on pretty much everything, so it's a pretty easy system to manage, and it's not super complicated, so it's not like you have to manage what materia you're learning. It's not like any are necessary for any point. You don't have to sit there and create a spreadsheet of what materia you need where for what encounter. You can make any character the way you want to, and it's a really interesting system, and I like it a lot. Alright, now here's the one that I'm sure a lot of people were waiting for. Final Fantasy VIII and the junction system. I have a hot take, right? Just between me and you, I have a bit of a hot take here. It's not that bad. Junctioning isn't that bad. Basically, you just equip a GF or summon for the people who aren't familiar with VIII's terminology, and you just get to draw limited use spells from different spots in the overworld, different spots in like towns, monsters, everything. Of course, it depends on your magic stat with how much you will get out of whatever draw. You can then equip that spell to whatever stat you have. So say you have a GF that gives you the ability to slot something into your strength stat. You can put whatever spell you get from like a monster, location, whatever, and boost that stat through magic. It's pretty good. I don't know, I found it pretty easy to understand for the most part. You can also learn abilities through GFs that you may be familiar from other entries, like auto haste, or even more active abilities or passive ones that you can equip to your command menu rather than having magic or your summon or anything. I just feel like it's not as complicated as people think. It just has like an extra layer to it that people don't seem to really understand that well. I don't know, I just don't think it's all that bad. I think people over-exaggerate it a bit. It's maybe not my favorite system, but it's really not that bad. Come on. Okay, now we get into one of my own favorites again, Final Fantasy IX. It's a very kind of not in your face system. It's a bit confusing for people who might not go in knowing exactly what to do. So they go about the same system as materia. However, instead of equipping items to then slot into your gear, you just equip the gear and it has the abilities baked into it. So like you can equip some accessories and they could give you quiet, or a passive ability that grants the soft ability. I know you, I know some of you, I know what some of you thought as soon as I said soft. Each ability can cost points that you get through leveling up, and you can equip stuff like new skills through leveling up weapons that permanently stay on your character. You don't have to keep the thing equipped just to be able to use it. And using stuff like summons for Garnet and Aiko. You get different Adolins for them. Whatever you want to do is pretty good. I like it a lot. I think it's fine. Okay, now, the one that a lot of people may also have been waiting for. There's a lot of them. A lot of people wait for a lot of games in here. Final Fantasy X is probably just the best one. It's just all in all, it is one of the best ones. The official name is the Conditional Turn-Based Battle, because we're finally out of the ATB system, and it takes normal turn-based and just completely flips it on its head, giving you more ways to influence how a battle plays out. You can raise your speed to have multiple turns one after another. You could have Tidus go like 3 times in a row based off how the setup is. You can kill different enemies to influence your own turn and make your turn go faster. It's great. I think it's genuinely one of the best systems that they've ever used, and other games have acknowledged this because they used it in Opera Omnia, the Final Fantasy Dissidia mobile game that I will talk about eventually, and just even games that aren't even made by Square Enix. Like Pokemon Legends Arceus uses a similar system, very, very similar, and something like Dragon Ball Fusions uses a super similar system as well. Like, it's super influential, and I think it's a great system, and I wish that they used it a bit more, but it's great. I love it. It's probably my favorite one overall. Okay, originally I wasn't going to include a lot of sequels and stuff. I didn't include After Years because there was like nothing, and I didn't include Intermission because that's just like an hour-long movie, but like 10-2 just takes the ATB system and makes it so much fun, right? They sped it up, actions are able to happen at the exact same time now, so you can just combo someone to death, and the Dress Sphere system is just the job system, but with magical girl transformations. It's kind of great. Each character has their own animation that plays that fits their personality. So going through the gull wings, you get Yuna, Riku, Pain. All of them get it. It's great. It's probably just up there as one of the best ones. They really just did two of the best ones back to back. Super fun, and it's probably one of the best ways that the ATB system has been used other than Remake. Alright, skipping over 11, we're not covering MMOs, we're going into 12. And this is where I'm really not super familiar with it, because 12 is... it is a game, it's not a bad game, it's just, basically it boils down to, if you code and wear thigh highs, it is your game. You will love this game, because it's just a million different if-then statements, right? So, the combat before you get to the if-then statements is really slow, right? And enemies die quick, but it's a very slow system. Essentially, you pick a command, it takes a while to actually activate, and it'll just go. Aside from your basic attack, they don't loop, so it's not like you set one and then you have to interrupt to pick a different one. It's just, it's fast, right? Everyone says that it's really fast. It's a very slow game, it felt like. I don't know. But later on in the game, you get the gambit system, which is just if-then statements for different party members. You just set AI commands. It's straight up just a coder's dream, right? If a character reaches 40% health, you can have them set Curaga, or like if an ally reaches a certain amount of health, you can have them cast Haste and Reflect or something like that. It's a lot of just, I don't know, I'm not too big on it. It just seems a bit too, like, you have to plan 10 million spaces ahead rather than just focusing on what you do. I haven't finished the game, but it's possible I can come around to it, but right now I'm just not that big on it, if I'm being real. Okay, we're taking on this whole trilogy here, so buckle up. I'm gonna kind of do it all as much as I can in one go, so we'll see how this goes. Final Fantasy 13 and 13-2 use pretty much the same system, only with some very minute changes that I'm not really going to go over. I'm just going to go over the system in general. Each party member has a unique ATB gauge that's divided up into sections. Stronger action, the bigger chunk of the ATB bar is taken out. Using just a basic attack takes one chunk, but using something as strong as like Firaga or Flare or whatever takes 3. It relies on chaining commands, which can be done if you have enough ATB gauge and planning, but the main thing is it works. I think it works, but you also have to work around paragam shifting, or paragam. Usually consisting of offense, defense, healing ones. You can swap between them mid-battle. It gives them different titles. I think there's a set amount of titles that they have set up, but it just feels... some of it feels weird, some of it feels good. I don't know exactly how to sit on it. It's like a middle point where there's parts that I really like, and then there's parts that kind of feel a bit weird, I guess. The weird thing, you also get a rating for your combat, which fully relies on your performance in battle, and that decides your drops. If you get 0 stars, you get garbage or nothing, and if you get 5 stars, then you just get the best loot that you can from that encounter. I think it's better than RNG in some ways, but I feel like it could be a bit better. I don't know. I feel like it could maybe be a bit more balanced, where you don't just get garbage at 0 stars or 1 star, and maybe just the 5 is a guaranteed rare drop, like if there's a weapon that drops from an item. I don't know. Maybe I'm weird. It just seems a bit... It's a very middle ground one, I guess. And now on to Lightning Returns, which is crazy because, you know, the last system, it's gone. They went with a more DMC-like combat system, which is kind of crazy, right? Lets you change between a couple different schema, which is just jobs, gives new outfits similar to dress spheres, but less flashy, and each outfit has its own ATB gauge. It also kind of uses a system similar to Final Fantasy VII Remake, with a stagger gauge being the main focus of combat, while also allowing Lightning to spend energy points on super flashy moves or stronger abilities like Army for One, which is like her signature move. It is a very weird entry. I don't know. It just felt like a very weird step into like DMC combat, like the ARPG kind of style that they then refined and used a bunch for pretty much every Final Fantasy game after this one. So yeah, it's something all right. Alright, I played around with where I wanted to put this one. This is Final Fantasy VII Remake, by the way. I played around with where I wanted to put this entry specifically because I wasn't sure whether I was going to do it right after 7 or if I was going to do it later on, but let's talk about it now. Final Fantasy VII combat for the remake is just, to me, just feels like Kingdom Hearts combat. It's flashy, it uses a bunch of everything from a lot of old Final Fantasy games. It has ATB gauge for everything except for your basic just attacks and everything, and you also get each character having unique attacks or a Y move depending on what controller you're using. Cloud has Operator and Punisher mode. Aerith has a little magic landmine that after a certain amount of time explodes, and it has different variations based on how much you charge it. Tifa, you get an uppercut that changes depending on if you use an ability like Unbridling Power to charge it up and do more damage. It uses the materia system from 7 and uses a lot of stuff from Final Fantasy 9 as well, having a lot of abilities and weapon skills be tied to different weapons they have to master. Like Cloud getting a spiked bat, you have to charge your proficiency to then get Dispel as a skill that you can use with whatever weapon. Now, some weapons can change how the playstyle is, like using the spiked bat, for example. It changes Cloud's Punisher style to be a lot more of a batter's style, and it requires a lot of charge-up attacks. It's not very viable for some situations. If it's your favorite one, by all means, use it. But it turns Punisher mode into a lot slower, charged-up hit attack style, rather than its normal just being a bit more heavier, giving the ability to counterattack melee attacks and everything. So yeah, it's really fun though. It is one of my favorite combat systems because it just feels a lot like Kingdom Hearts, and it's not just because, oh, action RPG, Kingdom Hearts. It just feels good, and I like it a lot. Let's just tack Rebirth on here because it doesn't do a huge amount, but it does add a bunch of things that is worth talking about. Rebirth takes the original system and makes it 10 times more fun, allowing synergy moves, a lot more air combat, new characters to learn, team-up attacks. It's great. I like it a lot. The only problem is they have some characters that don't actually get to be controlled by the player, and they just jump in for team supers, which is, I don't know, it's kind of fine, but Rebirth as a game just kind of expands upon everything that Remake puts in. So I'm just very, very curious to see how Rebirth grows more. I haven't been able to play a huge amount. Alright, our final system, because I don't own Final Fantasy 16, is Final Fantasy 15, which is action RPG mixed with elements of the wait and active modes from a lot of the ATB style Final Fantasy games. This only goes over Noctis' system, by the way. I haven't touched any of the DLCs, really. I haven't played a huge amount of 15, but I played enough to get an understanding of the combat and everything. It's a real-time style with elements of, again, Kingdom Hearts Type 0. You can bind magic to any of the D-pad buttons while having an Ultra Instinct button, which is just the guard button for dodging for free. You just hold down X or square. Now, you can also parry with that. Holding your attack button lets you do combos. It's very much an automated system, but you can swap weapons on the fly. Each weapon has their own inputs for different attacks, like Greatsword's having an attack that leaves Noctis vulnerable for a few seconds while it charges. If you hit back while attacking, you can also do a warp attack that you can use to attach to terrain and heal health, MP. There's a bit of a tutorial at the beginning of the game, so it feels kind of redundant going over this because it teaches you everything. There's also a tech bar for a lot of team-up attacks, like if you want Prompto to do an attack, you just hold down the right trigger and a direction on the D-pad, and it'll prompt them to do an attack, and then you can do a follow-up afterwards. It's fun. I haven't played too much of it, so I can't give like a proper judgment on it, I guess. But it's very fun. I want to play more in this. I want to play more in the future. So maybe we'll see. Maybe we'll do something with some of the games that I haven't played on here at some point. I don't know. We'll see. And that's it, because I don't own the other games, and there's no real way to play 11 and 14 for me. We covered all of them, except for the ones that I just mentioned. If I misrepresented your game, then by all means tell me. I'm sorry. You can just tell me in the comments right now. Go down there. I want to come back to this and do this once I play 16, 11. If the third part of Final Fantasy VII Remake is out, then that's great. If Final Fantasy IX comes out, then that's great. The remake for that, I mean. So I can really, in good faith, give a good breakdown of those. So, yeah. I hope you enjoyed. If you liked it, why not? Just stick around, do everything on the screen. I think I'm going to do a challenge run next again, like the previous one. So we'll see. Anyways. See you later.